If you grew up in the 1980s or 90s, you were privy to some excellent arcade racing games. They started out mainly as sprite-scaling monsters that were smooth as butter, and ended up as cutting-edge polygon pushers that just impressed the hell out of you each and every time you saw one. And there was a wide array of manufacturers that contributed. Whether you loved Sega, Namco, Konami, Capcom, Taito, and many others, they all had at least a couple of choices for you to dabble in. As the arcade scene began to die down in the early 2000s, so did the flow of arcade racing games. Home games began to look just as good, had more to do, and were far more realistic. While this certainly was a good thing in many ways, I never lost my love for the simple joys of those earlier arcade games. They weren't about realism at all, but were rather visceral celebrations of speed and adrenaline. Flying around corners at 150 miles per hour was a special kind of fun that the more realistic home racers lacked on a grander scale. Recently, there has been a trend to resuscitate the old school look and feel of these kinds of arcade racing games. 2018's Horizon Chase Turbo was a really nice take on the Outrun and Top Gear formula, and packaged it up in a nice looking engine that played and sounded great. And now, new for 2020 is Hotshot Racing, a retro-inspired joint created by Sumo Digital and Lucky Mountain Games. Does it capture the magic of those great arcade racing games you loved way back when? Or is it just a simple game that fails to deliver on its lofty promise? Let's find out. Starting up Hotshot Racing, you are met with a few different options to engage in. There is a Championship Grand Prix mode, where you race a set number of contests and gain points depending on how well you do, as well as a single race option that allows you to tackle one track at a time. Within the single race mode, there are also additional options, such as a cops and robbers race that is essentially a survival mode where you are either a cop or a driver trying to get away. Crashing into one another depletes life, and you must make the checkpoints to bank the money you earn. As each racer crashes and burns, they become deputized and turn into cops, making things pretty tough on the racers that are left. There is also a drive or explode race that forces you to drive at a certain speed or, as the title suggested, your ass is a pile of dust. This has a life bar as well, and other drivers will constantly try and wreck you. The arcade mode is the tried and true race against the clock you know so well. Each of these modes have 16 available tracks from the get-go, ranging from jungles, mountains, and deserts. You also have an assortment of different drivers to choose from, each from different countries, and each one with an assortment of their own cars. These drivers and cars can be customized with the money you win. With the 16 tracks, over 30 cars, and 8 drivers, there is a fair amount of content here, and hopefully more will follow soon with expansion packs. The gameplay is a mix of many games from days gone by. There are drafting mechanics to get a boost while closely following a car, there are drift mechanics taken from games like Outrun 2, and there are boosts that you can store up for doing both of these things extremely well. Crashing takes it away, however, and the AI is nastily efficient at messing you up at the worst possible time. It's aggressive as hell, constantly bashing into you for position, and knows no fear on the harder settings. The normal, hard, and expert difficulties are separated by faster speeds and a much more efficient AI that is so much better at drafting, drifting, and boosting, making it so anything but a perfect race is a waste of your time. You'll definitely need to work your way up to these higher settings as you become more familiar with each track and the various cars you can choose from. Drifting is the main gameplay element that determines how you do, and the closest game to it is Outrun 2. It's not an exact match, however, as this game allows you to over and understeer while drifting quite a bit to various results. Some cars grip more, so they rely on drifting a little less. and they often have the acceleration and top speed to allow you some wiggle room in how you play. Some cars power slide like a champ though, and if you get a handle on it, it feels great. There are even some off-road segments that are a bit more slippery and require a lighter touch. Mastering the various mechanics allow you to unlock additional customizations and rewards as you play. All in all, it's a solid representation of the era of racer it was shooting for. It's simple to pick up, has enough modes that expand to great multiplayer, and has that great sit back and relaxed feel that defined many of these games 20 plus years ago. The visuals that are behind Hotshot Racing are more akin to virtual racing than Daytona USA. Everything is mostly flat shaded with extremely bright coloring. There are people out there that really appreciate this type of look, and I'm one of them. While they do lack the finer texture details of other games, there is a surreal look to it all that really stands out. While it shares the look of virtual racing, the polygon counts and technology driving it are far more impressive. There is loads more detail, loads more special effects, and it all runs blisteringly smooth. The art direction is perhaps the biggest triumph here, however. I've always said that if you want to make your arcade racer visually appealing, you must have set pieces, and Hotshot Racing has them here in droves. Volcanoes, waterfalls, ski lifts, and spectators all line the roads with plenty of things to look at. This provides each track with a personality all its own and is mandatory for a game of this type. The cars look pretty good as well, and despite their low polygon models, they still make it easy to connect them to their real-world inspirations. The only thing missing here is weather and night races, something I feel would have completed this package and made it just about perfect. As it stands though, I really dig it, and it captures the early 90s feel on an excellent level regardless. The sound and music in an arcade racer can be just as important as the graphics and gameplay. I mean, think back to some of your favorites. Outrun, Daytona, Sega Rally. I bet if you closed your eyes, you could still hear those classic anthems playing as if they were right in front of you. Unfortunately, nothing here reaches that level of greatness. There is no single track that will make you feel as giddy as Splash Wave or as joyful as Sky High. But what it lacks in overall emotional power, it makes up for in quality and variety. There is a strong selection here that sounds quite good, and they are quite different from one another. The music that plays during the menu sounds great as well and really does convey that old feeling of what you'd hear years ago. I am somewhat sad that we don't have a few standouts to lead the otherwise solid musical selections, but I'll take this over a bad showing any day.
Not too early for shambles, is it?
So what's the final verdict on this one? Well, I guess it depends on what you're looking for personally. If you were the type to go for the realistic stuff, I wouldn't waste your time here. This is not a sim racer, nor does it try to be. It also isn't going to give you hundreds of cars and dozens of tracks. This is an homage to arcade racing games. That means speed over realism, tracks that have character, and gameplay that is easy to pick up and execute without knowing the first thing about how to take a corner. In that regard, Hotshot Racing is a resounding success story. The winning run and virtual racing inspired visuals set a great classic tone that the gameplay is able to meet and hold your interest. Once you get tired of the Grand Prix and arcade modes, you have Cops and Robbers and Driver Explode to mess around with. And of course, you can't forget the possibilities of the 8-player network play. If you have 4 friends or family members, there's also the 4-player couch co-op to consider. As is the case with all video games, it isn't perfect. The aggressive AI is irritating and can cost you races, which wouldn't be so bad if you could wreck them as easily as they wreck you, but you can't. In order to access the faster speeds, you need to play the harder difficulties, which in turn brings even tougher and more aggressive AI. This can easily frustrate younger players, keeping family time forever locked to the slower speeds. I really wish they'd separate the difficulty and the speed classes into 2 categories to avoid this. It doesn't affect single players so much, but it does dampen the local multiplayer quite a bit. Of course, if that doesn't affect you, there is otherwise little here to complain about. You get plenty of tracks, plenty of cars, and the visuals and sound make it a total package. Sumo Digital and Lucky Mountain Games released a fine product here that does its heritage justice. It's available on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, PC, and Switch. I'm Sega Lord X. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.